Unashamed and Afraid, a show unashamed about sexual addiction recovery and unafraid of coming into Christ for healing, where we share real recovery stories, learn from experts, and share resources that actually work. So join us in being unashamed and unafraid. Julie, how are you?
I am so good and so grateful and excited to be here.
We are excited to have you here, and tell us what exotic land you are coming from.
I live in St. George, Utah, and for anyone that's wondering, that's God's country, and there will be no argument there. Just putting that out there right now. Just saying.
Yes. I can tell you, my wife would agree with you. She wishes we lived in St. George. That would be a dream come true if I told her we're moving to St. George tomorrow. That's so St. George is where, for those of you who aren't local to the state of Utah, that's where when you want to get out of the snow in the winter and you want to do the sunshine and the beauty of the desert and the red rocks and all that, that is where all of that is happening.
Yeah.
Yep. And so, Julie, tell us about you. We're talking about equine therapy, which people know the word equine, equestrian, the horses, the things, right? Therapy, people are familiar with talk therapy, where I sit in front of someone with a clipboard and they talk to me about my life and feelings, smashing those two together. So for those of that, this is a new experience, kind of paint yourself into context. We've never met you. Okay. Tell us who you are.
Well, I mean, I could start way back. It was what I'd started in 1998 that brought me to equine therapy in 2009. 1998, I was introduced to energy work, and it changed my whole life. Energy healing, energy work, I don't know what you want to call it. Woo-woo.
Yeah, that. We're down with some woo-woo.
Hey, woo-woo is good. And I became like enamored with it. When I was introduced to it, at first I thought it was actually my aunt and my mother that had introduced me. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're leaving the church. Something's wrong. I mean, I had all of these, things go through my head. But then as I started to see that, it was pretty powerful stuff. So anyway, I learned it. I created a business around it. I still work with it daily with people. And that was 25 years ago to almost 26 years ago. And in 2009, I do not remember how I saw or was introduced to equine therapy, but I was like, oh my gosh, because horses are my other children. In fact, if you talk to my 4 sons, who are adults now, they are a little bit concerned that there's more horse pictures than them and grandchildren pictures on my phone. I don't know. It just happened that way. So anyway, in 2009, I was introduced to Equine Assisted Learning. And at the beginning of 2010, I took a certification course. Later that year, I took another certification course with a different company. I was just eating it up. And I literally said, Heavenly Father, I know that these two things can work together. What I love with my energy work and my horses, because I did all kinds of fun things with my horses. But I knew that this was something that I could use to help people that would expand what I was already doing. And when I say help people, I mean, I just show up as a facilitator, and they actually help and heal themselves. I just give them one of the tools on how best to do that. So in so doing, I literally... I after I was all certified and I, had all the credentials or whatever, because I want to be clear, I'm not a therapist. I'm what they call an equine assisted or an equine specialist. So I can either work on my own and call it equine assisted learning, or I can work with a therapist and call it equine assisted therapy. In my private sessions, it's EAL, equine assisted learning.
Yep. Well, we get that. So we run the whole... We get used to that whole thing, because I'll give you the past. Everyone's like, that's weird. The whole experience, right? When people talk about coaching or therapy, and the whole energy work and woo-woo thing isn't real. You wouldn't go to the graduate school and get the clinical letters for therapy. That's not valuable in that part. And so because I just want to say, for anyone who's like, oh, so this lady's a joke, I'm like, nope, there are tons of people who are coaches, energy workers, like great examples, Tony Robbins. T.
Yes.
Robbins ain't no therapist and does a ton to help you. So different things. If you're not a Tony Robbins fan, there's a bunch of people that are like him that you don't have to love Tony
I am.
Robbins. But point being
awesome.
is, right, that's a whole world or whatever. So just want to speak
Yes.
some legitimate. There's bad therapists out there and there's bad coaches and there's bad energy. There's bad in all of the camps. So,
Yeah.
but still a very legitimate camp. I want to name that. So equine therapy, equine assisted learning. I'll keep saying equine therapy because I'm
And
used to
please
saying
do.
that term.
Please
but,
do.
Yeah, but tell us, like, what are you talking about? Because if I'm listening to this, I'm like, so, like, I talk to a horse about my depression, or, like, what are we doing here?
Okay. Equine therapy are ground-based activities where we include and introduce horses and humans so that we can have a different take and a different look and a different perspective on healing. When I say ground-based, we don't ride horses. The activities are all where the human is on the ground, feet on the ground with the horse on the ground.
So I don't need to know how to ride horses.
You do not need to know how to ride horses. In fact, when I have somebody say, I'm terrified, I've never been around a horse, I'm like, yay, good. Because then they're not going to try to do the horsemanship thing. They're not going to do that horsemanship thing. I want them there to feel what they feel. And the power of the horses is that I had somebody ask me this question literally today. Do horses read your energy? Do they just do that when you walk up? And I go, it's not even a thought for them. It's second nature because they're prey animals. It's what they do. So if you walk up and your heart's beating and you're sweaty and you're all anxious, they're not going to think that you're nervous of them. They're going to look around and go, why are we anxious? Why is your heart beating? They don't realize that it's because you're scared of them. So they are going to, that's how they're going to, that's what they do. That's how they stay alive. So it's always just really interesting to throw the human. So we're predators, right? The horses are prey. We're predators. And so we get to learn how to, I don't know, tap into, if you will. The thing about the horses is, and it's almost unexplainable. I mean, I can give you all the scientific stuff, and it doesn't matter. What matters is you go out there, you have an experience with the horse, and then we'll process that experience, whether you're there with me just alone or you're with a group or with a family. I had somebody text me today and said my family needs to come and do an equine session. So we're setting that up. So it doesn't matter how many people are there. What matters is what happens when you walk into the arena inside. And I'm really, really big on making sure that we don't label it. We just say you're going to go out there and have an experience. Well, is it going to be a good experience? Well, I don't know. What's your definition of good? Is it going to be a bad experience? I don't know. What's your definition of bad? So I actually encourage people to let go of good and bad because we don't police that. How do you feel? What's going on inside? And what tends to come up is then what we can clear for them with the energy work that I do.
And what's going to come up, we're talking about what comes up for me as an individual, not what comes up in the horse, right?
Correct.
Because we're not going to say, hey, this horse is depressed today, so I know you're here to work on grief, but we're actually going to work on depression because,
this horse is depressed.
Liberty here is that this horse is doing depression today, so that's what your session's on, right? It's whatever I'm coming with to the session, right? That's what's going to end up playing out in the experience, right? Because I think if I'm listening to this, I'm not like, okay, so I just go, random crap happens to me. It may or may not be relevant to what's going on in the healing I'm trying to do. No, what's going to show up is what I'm bringing, which is going to be the real stuff, right? So it's not random, I guess, is what I'm saying.
It is not random. And I don't know what's going to show up. So my job is to notice what the horse does with the interactions that they have with that person and then ask questions about it. I noticed the horse moved away from you when you did this or I noticed that there was a lot of energy out there and it showed up in the horses running around the arena numerous times really fast with a lot of dust. Or I mean, I can give you an example. I had a woman once, and we were kind of doing a group women's thing. And so there are many women out in the arena. And I had three of my horses um, surround, was it three or four? I don't remember. But anyway, surround this woman. And she,
Mm.
before she came with an intent that she had not shared with me. Her intent was that she got some peace over a child that had passed, and then some peace with maybe some of the kids that were, they were all adults. And so here she come out of there just sobbing. And I said, talk to me. And she said, each one of those horses that surrounded me were my different children, even the one that had passed. And for her, and what was so interesting for me is one of the horses that was there is one of my horses that's kind of, she just would rather everybody go away except the person that she wants attention from. She just doesn't want the other horses around. So for her to quietly stand there and allow this to happen. So I never know what's going to show up, and I never know how profound it's going to be. I just know that it's going to be profound. I can count on that every time.
Mm.
So that's just one
Mm-hmm.
experience.
Mm-hmm.
So
Go, James.
let's hear it.
Like, I'm just like, tell me more, because I'm like, help me in, I guess, envision.
We do experiential stuff all the time.
I do.
And we see the same thing of the stuff just kind of plays out. But
Right. And so I'm just like, kind of tell me how, like, is it like, okay, do we do some prep beforehand?
Yep.
Do I just kind of like, okay, knock on the door and then like, well, let's walk out to the stable and see what happens? Or like, I guess kind of just give me some more context, what it might look like.
Absolutely. So I've got, I don't know, 75 different activities that I've created, or even clients that have created that say, hey, I want to create an activity. And I go, great, you get to facilitate it and everything. Anyway, I've got all of these gathered up, and it's really interesting. Most of the time when I send my activity to the therapist the night before with one of the programs that I'm working with. And once in a while when we meet in the morning for a few minutes before, I'll say, that doesn't feel right. And it'll come to me exactly which one I'm supposed to do. So it's just a feel that, because I've been a facilitator for so many years, I've been doing the equine therapy since 2012. Yeah. So you just kind of get that feel for it. But I set an intention, and this has all been created. The program that I work is partially mine, partially others, partially. We've just created the most amazing way of doing this. So we set an intention,
as
and the
clients
intention.
have experienced things, yeah.
Yes, but I mean, with the programs that I work with, we've just worked and really, and so many of these ideas are not mine, and it's like we just incorporate it, and it's been so powerful. But what we'll do is we'll set an intention, and the people that I work with, I'll say, okay, today's intention is the actual activity. So I might say, today's intention is to stand in the arena while as three different horses come and touch you. And then I'll say, and here's the ground rules. It's a silent activity. You can't touch the horse. The horse has to touch you. And you have to stay in the same spot. Okay? That's it. That's simple. You cannot imagine the stories that happen in somebody's head when the horses don't approach them. Or they approach somebody else and not them. Or how come that horse approached them, and how come that horse came to me 3 times, but none of the other horses? The stories and the feeling of, especially when they're trying to heal and they've been in this addict brain, or in a trauma brain. I work with a lot of people that have had trauma, women that have had trauma, and the brain tells a lot of really cool stories that have nothing to do with anything, and they're not true. And I really pound on that. I go,
Right.
That's the story. So anyway, they go out there. I'm a big one about saying, keep your word, especially in my addiction world. Keeping your word, if you'll keep your word, your life will work. I'm not telling you it's easy, but if you'll keep your word, your life will work. And so when they come out, I'll say, did you keep your word? No, I talked, or I moved, or I touched the horse before they touched me, or whatever. And we don't belabor that too much unless I have a client that just keeps doing it over and over again. But I'll just say, okay, that's a notice. And I really work hard not to shame. I'm human, and I know sometimes that comes out that way. But I'll say, what's your notice? I want them to notice without labeling it, that it was bad or good or right. I didn't do it right. I just really, was anything in the directions said that you had to do it right? Was there any? So again, it's about telling stories, letting those stories go, have an experience that is never the same. I can have somebody go in and do that very same experience 6 months later, and we'll have a completely different experience because they're on a completely different plane. So the context is, come and sit with a horse. Find out. I mean, one day I had a gal come in, and I hadn't quite figured. I just kept getting really blank, and I wasn't sure. And we'd talked, and we did some energy work beforehand. And I finally said, you know what? I started to say this earlier, about 11 a.m. every morning, my horses are all spread eagled out in the sun, right? Even if it's been raining, they're like, it's 11 a.m., we're taking a nap. And I said, go sit amongst the horses. There was 4 or 5 of them on the ground. And I said, take a chair with you. So she took a chair and just sat down. And it was so interesting because one of the horses stood up, came over to her, and laid back down right next to her. She didn't even interact. Anyway, again, she came out sobbing. She came out with some really cool ideas of what more we needed to clear. And I can't tell you why she's sobbing. I can't tell you why it shows up the way it shows up. I just have to set up and facilitate the activity and then stand back and let the energy take over. And that's what happens. And then sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people are like, if I'm working with when I'm working in the addict world, I've got numerous clients, numerous programs that come to me to do equine. I have a facility with one client, and then I have other clients that come. And sometimes they haven't stepped into their recovery yet. And I just say, you know what, why don't come? I just invite them not to come.
Well, a question I want to ask her on that, because we're a bunch of people in recovery, is so like when is that jumping off mark? So I've done equine therapy as a client.
Okay.
So I've had the experience with it, and some experience, what I'd say is, so it feels like it, and then you can correct me because you're the one who knows, but it feels like it's really about like deep work, subconscious work. And so if I'm not willing to go there with myself, like if I'm unwilling to make that contract to keep my word, right? As you're saying, like, is like, do I have that right? Like, this is the place to go, or the tool to use, or the experience to have when I'm trying to figure out how to do some of that deeper work or let that subconscious work play out. Like if I'm trying to get out of my head, would that be a good time to insert the equine?
My experience have been is, if you have the idea to go get an equine, have an equine session, do it. I don't care where you're at in your journey. Said a few moments ago, I work with a lot of women that have had trauma. Usually it's sexual trauma or trauma based on, men that they've married that weren't a good fit, but the trauma started clear back when.
Yep, betrayal.
As a child, usually. Yeah. And the key is to get in there and release that trauma. You can't move forward, and this is for the addicts too. And in fact, I would say that when a person comes to me and they've had a lot of trauma, they're almost addicted to the trauma. And this is all psycho stuff, and I'm not a therapist, but it's like you're addicted to trauma. It's familiar.
Yeah, it's how I've defined my life, and
Yep.
And so if that's how I'm used to defining my life, it's we have a colleague, Mark Pimsler, who always says people mistake safe for familiar. So because it's familiar, I'm mistaking that for safe, and they get stuck in the familiar of being in the trauma or being in the addiction. Totally.
Exactly. And here's the thing. We're good at it, right? I'm good at being a victim. I'm good at living in this trauma. And I don't know if I'll be good at healing. I don't know if I'll be good out there having to set boundaries. And so why would I want to change? But let me tell you something. When you have a 1,200-pound animal talking to you about boundaries, you learn real quick to set them.
That's the boom. That's it. Wrap this episode, Julie. Drop the mic. Let's go.
I mean,
That's
right?
great.
One of the things that I'll say, especially to my adult men clients, if they get stepped on, I say, well, what the hell were you doing putting your foot underneath their foot? So that's the accountable version, right? They didn't get stepped on. They're not a victim to that horse. They went
Right.
unaware and they forgot to set a boundary. That's on them, you know. So, I mean, I don't use horses that run around stepping on people. I work with 16 and 17 and 18-year-old girls. They're amazing. They're amazing. A lot of them are at a facility that they didn't necessarily choose to go to. But they walk into there and those horses have a way of talking to them and they just soften. When I first decided, or I think they approached me, I can't remember how that all, yeah, they approached me and said, and I was like, oh, Lord. And I really said that too in a prayer on my knees. I don't do well with girls. Do I really want to take this? I raised 4 sons and I do really well with, boys. I was a boy mom and I knew that I was supposed to take these girls on and I'm so grateful that I did. I've worked with them for a couple of years now. And, there's an ebb and flow. They leave the facility, new girls come in. But I have found that these girls are powerful and they're, they step into it and if they get whiny and all of that, I'm like, quit whining. We're not doing that here. So go whine to your horse. Go whine to the horse that you've been assigned today. Well, they don't listen. And I go, I bet you they will. So, and then they'll have some experience. I mean, even this morning I had an experience where a horse went down to roll with the gal in front of her. I mean, holding onto the lead rope, and she just, it was more of an accident. He stood back up and she was just standing a little bit too close and he hit her right in the face just with his body, just by standing up. And and of course, there's a lot of compassion and empathy there. It startled her, made her nose bleed. And I just don't ever have any of those. Okay, I need to rephrase that. That is not something that I attract in my equine therapy, is somebody getting hurt or stepped on or whatever. And so I put my arms around her and she just literally said, I wasn't paying attention. And I said, that's okay. So I don't ask people to go out there and be perfect. I ask them to go out there and be aware. So they've committed, let's say they've committed, part of the pre-process is committing to a state of being. And so let's say they've committed to peace. And I said, more than likely, you guys are going to step out of peace. You just are. That's just life. We're human.
Sure.
Right.
Yep.
But the key is to notice. Did I step? Oh, I know. Oh, crap. I stepped out of peace. And then they have choice on whether they step back into peace. And I always tell everybody, like, I have a big banner for my retreats where it says, there's 2 of them. One of them just says, HMMMMMM, And the other one is, the notice is your superpower. I notice that I'm angry. I notice that I stepped out of peace. There's nothing wrong with being angry, and there's nothing wrong with stepping out. I don't want people to say, oh, I'm so bad, but that's where you go into that shame and that guilt. It's like, good Lord, notice that you went there and then choose to step back into what you committed to. So again, superpower is the notice. So, and the horses have a way of syncing up with you.
So I have a grumpy 16-year-old right now that might benefit by hanging out with the horse a little bit.
Send them on over.
Her.
Okay. Hers are great. Send her on over.
Now that we know you do girls.
I love the girls.
So like, if I was like, I'm a parent and I'm like, I wonder if this could benefit my kid. And there's this program. What's this program? What would that entail? What would that look like from the kid's perspective? And I guess me as a parent, like, just kind of walk me through that a little bit.
So I have a 3-session program that I do. And if you're local, you can do all 3 sessions with equine, or you can do one with equine and one with the energy work alone. I always incorporate the energy work into the equine, so you'd see it either way. And we would work 3 different times together. Where it's a minor, I would always ask the minor if it's okay if mom or dad is here. And a lot of times I would prefer the parent be there, but they can go sit in the car if the child or the teen says, look, I just don't want him here. And I'm like, okay, well, I need him to be here because you're a minor, but they're going to go sit in the car. So you guys get to decide what it looks like, and then we just go from there.
I see. So it's an hour long?
My equine session's about an hour and a half because we'll do the activity and then we process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that, so if people are looking at doing equine and they're not coming to St. George, right? They're finding it wherever they are around the country or whatever. Is that like, would you say like, yeah, that's kind of a typical format that you could imagine that you're going to step into?
Yeah. Which format?
That's probably going to be an hour and a half.
Yes.
Yeah. You'll probably do a couple sessions and not that you couldn't do more. And yeah.
Right.
So another question I have for you, Julie, is so we'll often say about like the group experience, like the way you do group is the way you do life, you know? So I guess that like, is that the experience you have when people are doing equine, like, you know, that they're surprised their experience with the horse is really their experience of their world and the experience of their relationships, and like, tell me about that.
That's funny you'd ask. I tell everybody, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I call my arena the arena of life. I go, when you step into that arena, that's your life. And I don't care when you come out of there, and I'll notice. I notice the horse did this. I notice you did this. Or I might say, it feels like, you know, they might be holding the horse clear up here with the lead rope. And I'll say, it feels like maybe you've got some issues with control. And they'll say, no, I don't. And I'll go, well, this is what I noticed. And the horse was flipping
They're holding the horse like this?
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
no, I don't. They're
and
choking the horse out. Yeah.
And the horse is flipping its head and trying to get away. And they're saying, this horse won't do what I want it to do. And I'm like, and did you really step out of the way to let the horse do what you wanted it, asking it to do? And is that what you do with your children? I mean, if they're there to talk about kids or whatever. Maybe you're not stepping back and allowing your kids, you know. So how you do one thing is how you do everything. It shows up every single time. I don't think there's a time that it hasn't shown up. And if they really want to dive in, I'm willing to go there because I see it pretty quick. Sometimes I've got somebody that's just like isn't ready to see it, and so I'll go at them lighter. We won't dive deep because whatever they get out of it is going to be helpful. So does that answer your question?
100%. How have you seen the equine therapy help with people who are wrestling with an addiction, who are trying to find recovery? What role have you seen equine play, you know, with those peeps, with our tribe? You know, and I want to back up a little bit before I answer that question. I struggled with addiction back in the late 80s. And I tell some of my clients, I don't even think my whole family knows that. Not that, you know, it was a long time ago. Send them the podcast, and now they can hear the story.
Right. And when I tell people that, they're like, wait, what? Because I can say, I can relate with you. No, you can't. Because they look at me and I'm running around and I'm a little bit mouthy but they don't see me as being in that place, in that darkness. And I'll go, oh, honey. Sure. Oh, honey. So back to what you said about as far as addiction and does it, you know, where do we step in? Addiction is a cover-up for the soul. It is a distraction for the soul and what you're feeling in your soul. And that's what addiction is. Almost anybody that I've worked with that has a really deep, long-term addiction are empathetic, kind, to make me cry, giving, gracious people. And because of that empathy, they can feel the energy and they take it on, and it's more than they know how to deal with. And so they turn to substance, pornography, screen addiction, you know, whatever. And gambling.
Whatever drug of choice, yeah.
Whatever drug of choice. And each one affects the brain a little bit differently. But what I have found is that it's just about uncovering those soul hurts and then making it safe to do so. And then living a little while with that thing uncovered and realizing that they can do it. and that that recovery is possible. And yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious. I want you to speak, because this is beautiful, Julie. I want you to speak more to what you mean when you talk about a soul hurt.
There are so many people in this world that have been abused, and I'm just going to step right out and say it, because it's, to me, the most prolific abuse out there is sexual abuse. And the more I learn about it, and I'm talking about little young ages, even the fact that, and I work with sex addicts in one of the programs, and my heart goes out because it wasn't their fault in the beginning, and even a friend showed them a picture. I know men that their first pornography experience was a friend showing them a picture in a magazine long before the internet showed up. And so it just tears a little bit at the soul. And so then when these sweet, kind, empathetic souls have trauma happen in their life, that's where they go. And when I say the soul hurt, trauma is so huge. We walk around with trauma. And here's the thing. We have something traumatic happen when we're 5 years old. And it might not even be traumatic. As an adult, you might look at it and go, that wasn't traumatic. But at 5, it was traumatic. Mm-hmm. And then you carry that belief about that trauma into adulthood. And so you have this belief about yourself of being unworthy and not able to, don't deserve. But it's by from a 5-year-old perception. And so you have to go back to that person and release the trauma of that age. So then they can come forward and look at it as an adult. Have you guys ever been going down the road and a red car pulls in front of you and slams on its brakes, and you have to slam on your brakes, and you and you almost hit the back end of it, and you're like, oh my gosh, and that adrenaline sets in your cell memory. Okay, you start noticing red cars. You see a red car, you might be shaking a little bit, and it was because of that one experience. It caused a trauma that set itself in the cells of your body. And so when I say a soul hurt, it's just those traumas that happen as we experience life. And then the sexual traumas are even more profound. And many people don't have sexual traumas that are addicted to whatever. But I find that it's much more prolific
Sure.
than we even know. It's crazy because I've done the energy work for 24 years or 25 years. And the number of people that I work with, and that's their core, I'm just like more than 70%. And I work with a lot of people. So it's just mind-boggling to me. And that tears at the soul. It opens your soul up. When our soul is open, it just lets all the stuff in. It's like opening up the gate to an irrigation ditch, or opening up the gate, and all the anything can come in and anything can go out.
Yeah, just love that phrasing, the soul hurt, the soul tear. I think it's just such a great way to talk about the experience, right? The impact.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess the vision I have for myself and what I do in my role, as a therapist is, I try to be somebody who helps provide, help removing the stumbling block or removing that block that's really keeping somebody from accessing the grace of God, that the atonement of our Savior, the price that He paid for us, so that they can really let that grace and healing finally come in.
Yeah.
How have you seen it, and inevitably God always shows up when that's done. How have you seen God show up in your work?
For me, every time that they walk in and put their hands on a horse, they're putting their hands on God's love. God created these horses. Sorry. They're special animals. Their purpose were beasts of burden. Some cultures use them as their food source. They are here for so many different reasons, and healing is one of them. And for me to go send somebody out in the arena with a horse, just one horse, and have them just hold and touch and feel and walk with and open their heart up to, that horse will bring them ideas that they don't even realize is coming from the horse. And they'll walk out and they'll say, I had the weirdest idea. I had the most weirdest thought come to me. And then we'll explore that thought, but I know where it came from. It came from God through that horse. So every time they go out and touch that horse, they're touching God, in my opinion. So I think he shows up every single day we walk into the arena with those horses. The other day, I was telling somebody this today, I had some things that I was working through, and I was working a horse that I barrel race with, which is a rodeo event. And I needed to get out of the saddle. I got out of the saddle, and all of a sudden, everything that I've been dealing with just came flooding. And I hadn't even been thinking about it. But in that moment, I put my arms around the horse, put my face in the horse's neck, and cried. And I probably cried it was an ugly cry. It was awesome. And then I stepped back and I looked at the horse, and his name's Nugget, and Chris will know who that is. But I stepped back and I just said, thank you. That was my release. I'm not even sure what I was releasing. I'm not even sure what I was crying about. But I allowed myself, and the horse was a safe place. These horses are safe places. One of my activities is just to go take the horse, walk anywhere you want on the property, go down the driveway, go out onto the street, come back, and tell that horse your deepest, darkest secrets. The thing about the horses and why they teach so well is because they don't talk back. And we can tell them our secrets, and we know those secrets are safe, and it's a way for them to start to stitch up that soul and to release some of this stuff that we need to tell other people but haven't had the courage to do so. And that horse allows them to practice and start gaining that courage to then take it to the next level, to the human that can help them in the next step of healing. So.
Mm-hmm. So, Julie, as we come to wrapping up the episode here, the question I just want to ask you, just as someone who's a guide, right, in this space and doing that, is we always talk a lot about that. We believe in recovered, not just recovering. We believe in healed, not just healing. And, in some circles we get crap for that. But just want to know, right, and just sharing your heart through your own personal experience, because there's just so many people out there that just believe I'm always going to be struggling with this. This is just my cross to bear. I'm always going to have the addiction, the depression, the marriage is always going to be hard. I'm always going to have low self-esteem. And so just as we wrap up the episode here, we'd just love to hear your heart and just your experience on, is getting to healed, is getting to recovered, really having those soul tears mended. Is it actually possible?
It is actually possible. And I'm speaking from personal experience. You talked about, in some circles, it's not, recovered instead of recovery. I have a real problem with saying I'm an alcoholic, or I'm this, or I'm that. One of the ways that I know the church encourages or suggests, invites people to say is, I'm a son or a daughter of God. I love that, because it doesn't keep you stuck in the I'm surviving. It makes me crazy. So I have to be careful, because I'm not a therapist.
You can say whatever you want on this podcast. Yeah.
The program that encourages that has helped millions of people, and that's how they stay sober. And so, of course, I wouldn't criticize that. I just wish that people would realize that you can mend your soul. You can mend it so that there's not even any scars on it. I believe God can do that for you. You just have to ask, and then you have to learn to let go of the ask. So many times we'll say, here, God, I wish I had a piece of paper in my hand, but we're going to say, okay, here, God, I'm going to give you everything. But then we take and tear off just a little corner, and we just keep a little corner, and then we hand the rest to God, and he's like, oh, honey, I need to hand it all to you. You need to give it all to me. But we have to start to be able to trust and know that it can be healed. And in the beginning, the knowing comes from hearing other people's experiences and going, and then changing the belief system, which I believe is the subconscious stuff, which is what the energy work works on, and changing that belief that says, I can't, it'll never happen for me, I don't deserve it. Do you know all the bad things I've done in my life? If you knew, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. I mean, the stories that people tell, I've told those stories to myself, and they're not true. They're just big old lies. And that's the key, is to just, if you have to lean on somebody else's belief for a while, do it. And if you have the opportunity to do any type of experiential healing, do it. The reason I love the horse experientials is because they're sentient beings. They're living beings. They have a heartbeat. Their heartbeat syncs with their herd, and their heartbeat will sync with your heartbeat, and you won't even know it's happening, and you will come out of there feeling joy that is not describable, and that's where you want to get. So I had this really cool experience, and I don't have no clue how to describe it. Awesome. Don't describe it. Feel it. Live in it. Be it.
Yep. Love it. Julie, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an awesome experience. Love what you're doing, but more just love you and your personality and the authenticity in which you're showing up with. If people wanted to find you, how would they go about doing that?
My email is julie@julieforbes.net. They can also find me on Facebook under Julie Forbes. If you type in Dragonfly Soul, which is my business, my energy business, you can find me there. At Dragonfly Soul 2 is my Instagram handle. Those are the places. But email me. I'll talk to you.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll put those in the show notes so you can have them as well. But if you're listening, that's where to get them. And so, Julie, thank you so much for coming on. And to everyone who's trying to connect with us, that's at Unashamed Unafraid. You can go to unashamedunafraid.com. And you can also donate there to become an outsider and help us with this movement so that more people can get messages of hope like the one Julie just shared with us. And really know that healing's possible. And so we are a 501c3 nonprofit. So those donations help to the cause of Camp and scholarships. And so if you are in need of help or know someone who is, we scholarship different retreats and experiences that we've found helpful in the healing process. So we invite you, if you need a scholarship, to go to the website and get a scholarship as well. Give us 5 stars on iTunes in particular. That's where the world algorithms decide whether or not we should come up in people's feeds so that they can get the message of hope. So give us 5 stars on iTunes, write a review, that helps us there. And if you donate, you become one of our outsiders. And our outsiders are those who are bold, accepted, and unashamed, and help us in this movement. So we invite you to do that. And if you've got a story, if you know some amazing healer like Julie who we need to know about, please tell us about him. Please email Jeremy at unashamedunafraid.com. And until we can connect again, or we can see you doing some equine with Julie, we invite you to stay unashamed.